Well, welcome back, Bulleen Boomers family. I have Nick Angove, our under-18 boys head coach, joining me at this moment. Grateful to have you on board, Nick. Thanks for accepting the reappointment.
Hi, Pete. Thank you very much. Yeah, great to be back on board for another year with Mighty Boomers, and great to be talking to you this morning.
I appreciate your time, and great news for us today that basketball's back. Hopefully, we can continue that on and finish this season off and get ready for season 21-22.
Yeah, I actually think you guys have just sent out emails on trainings tonight and tomorrow. So I know all my boys have been texting me the last 24 hours saying, when are we back? So it's fantastic. I guess I've got to get off this call pretty quick and get the training plans going.
Yeah, perfect. Now, Nick, you've got a pretty sensational history with the club, going back quite a few years, with a little break in the middle there. The under-18 boys program for you, what is it that you enjoy most and that you're looking forward to in this upcoming season?
Yeah, I guess, Pete, starting back a little bit in my progress through the Bulleen club, and it goes a long way back, not showing my age too much, but I actually grew up in Adelaide playing for South, and I know Mike Connell, if he listens to this, a special shout out because he was my under-14s coach back then. I coached at South, played at South all the way through to sort of the men's team, where unfortunately I blew my knee out in the sort of last year under 20s. Moved to Melbourne actually in, I think it was 98, 99, I'm not 100% sure, and started actually coaching at Bulleen back then in the 16s and 18s program. So looking at it now, that's nearly 22 years ago that I actually started coaching in 16s and 18s. I was lucky enough to coach with Scotty Christensen and Al McCaltry, who at the time was sort of swapping between 14s, 16s, 18s with myself. They were running, the Bulleen Academy, they were running the state programs. So I learned a lot around how to get involved. And I was also working with the youth and men's teams. And I think it was Nigel Purchaser at the time. So I'm going back a little few years there. And his son's, I think, playing now for Melbourne United. After that, I moved to Hong Kong. That was back in 2007. So, and my family and I sort of grew up, lived over in Hong Kong for 10 years, where my boys, one boy was born and one was literally a month old. So we've had 10 years in Hong Kong and moved back probably only 2 or 3 years ago. Luckily, Raquel reached out to me with Glenn Thornton actually, and asked if I was interested to come back look at coaching. So I rejoined the 18s program. So I've actually had a long history with the program, and I guess things don't change too much from year to year. You see the same sort of progression of kids coming through, which I love seeing. The athletes coming from 14s, 16s, and then you see them to come into 18s, where typically it's a good leveler in 18s. That big boy in under 14s who is dominating, and maybe not as dominating in under 16s, and in under 18s he ends up being the point guard. That's always a fascinating sort of progression. Or the point guard who goes to be a 6'5", 6'6", who we saw last year with Delhi and Co coming through. The program's amazing. But I guess this year is very different, and for me, I just want to see an uninterrupted season with COVID. It's been really tough on everyone, tough on families, tough on the athletes. With training on one week, training not on the next week. I mean, I think we're playing Friday night with very little training, and we're not going to be any different than any other team. So there's no change there, but just to have that uninterrupted season next year would be amazing. Touch wood. And to be able to plan things like going to tournaments, whether they're just in Victoria or going to classics or nationals for the 14s boys, etc., is where we all know you get those lifelong memories, right, for the kids and the families in terms of bonding and going forward. So hopefully,
sorry, Nick, keep going.
Yeah, I was just saying, hopefully we get that going forward.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed that is the case. And you made a very valid point there that, with trainings coming and going and not knowing whether we're having a training this week or not, there's a lot that the boys can be doing in their own time to help improve their performance. What are some of the things that you think they should be doing, or you expect your 18-1 boys to do in their own time to help support their improvement?
And this is a tough one. And, we have a lot of the kids asking those questions a lot. And I think when they get to under 18s, The problem the kids have is really time management and rehabilitation. And this is the most fascinating thing with these boys and girls coming into under 18s is they've got a lot on their plates, right, in under 18s, and they've got school, they've got life, you know, parties and boyfriend, girlfriends and mates, and then they've got sport, right? And I guess our job as coaches is to make sure we get that balance right, in terms of making sure it's not all about one or all about the other, because you need that good balance in your life. My boys will attest to this, that our priority is school for number one. So we want the boys to be studying first, and you know, we have to manage that athlete coach communication very strongly, because they're in year 10 and year 12, and that takes a priority for me. And if they need time off to study or rest, then we make sure that they have that without getting any ramifications on Friday night around courts and minutes, right? So the first one is really on time management. The second one that's massive in under 18s, I think it's less in under 12s and 14s, luckily, because the kids are still developing, is injuries and injury prevention. And again, we have to make sure that the kids have a well-balanced sort of program. And actually a well-balanced sort of thing around sport. So it's not just all doing basketball. You know, I'm really proactive in, if the kids have got footy training or athletics training or whatever they have, that they can do that as well, because it teaches their body to have different muscles getting used, etc., not just up and down the court. So we make sure that they have sort of, again, things we can control, which is a good balanced program around cardio. Really important in under 18s around strength and conditioning. We're luckily, we've got good access to guys like Sean Atkins, who plays in the men's team, who works at SRA, and a big shout out to him. My 18s boys all pretty much use Sean around the strength and conditioning, and that's getting their muscles right and getting their rehab right and their testing right, so they don't come in when they're fatigued and hurt ankles or knees, etc. And obviously the ones that we all know around making sure the boys stretch, eat well, sleep well, and plenty of rest. So you know, the injury prevention rehabilitation is massive for us, and we have to be mindful that, probably unlike a under 12-14 program where they've got to be on the court a lot more and practicing this and practicing that, we've got to make sure we get the balance. And so that's what we try and work through with the kids.
Well, that's a different way of looking at it, and it's a really important component of it, especially when you've got a season as long as what the VJBL season is, with only 10 players to work through in that regard. A lot of the time people think, oh, 10 players is a lot, but injuries do occur, and the way in which to prevent them and to rehab from them, you know, the better knowledge these young athletes have in prevention is going to make it much better for the teams and the programs in themselves. So you talked a little bit before about Scott Christensen and Al McCautry and so forth, and having some really experience to learn from as a younger coach growing up. A big part of basketball is IQ. Now, it's not just an athlete's IQ that's important. The coach's IQ is vital in a game, to be able to coach through the ebbs and flows of a normal game structure. For you, what are some of the important components of a game that you focus on each week and game by game in that scenario?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Pete. Week by week is very interesting, and we kind of talk a lot about what we can do as a team and what we can control, because the rest is kind of noise that if you can't control it, it can get negative and you can worry about it. So we're a very big, we put a lot of emphasis on controlling our own KPIs, so our key performance indicators. As coaches, and my assistants, we're in constant contact with our athletes on and off the court. You know, we have the weekly meetings, or not weekly with every player because it's too much, but we're constantly having the meetings with the players. We're constantly chatting to them off court and giving them the feedback. In terms of the communication, this is where it's really important with you know, 15, 16, 17-year-old athletes, right? We have to set early our objectives and objectives for the team, but also for the individuals. And they change, obviously, through the year in terms of the team objectives and the individual objectives. We also need to then understand, well, what can we do as coaches and players, athletes, to actually achieve those objectives? So it's a ever evolving sort of practice that we go through. Just to give you an example, and hopefully not everyone sees this from outside of Bulleen, but our team objectives, for example, is we want to make sure we're hitting greater than 70% free throws. we want to make sure we're hitting greater than 50% field goals. And actually, we want to make sure we're hitting, the opposition is less than 40% field goals. Now, you might go, well, that's outside of our control. We believe that actually a good pressure defense can actually make their percentages go down. So we're always looking from a team perspective to actually get a lower field goal from them and a higher field goal from us, which sounds obvious, but sometimes it doesn't work, right? The other interesting one, which is an evolution one as the season goes on, is we're currently trying to keep teams to less than 14 points per quarter. So we're constantly looking at each sort of quarter by quarter whether or not we've achieved that KPI, because we know that winning teams in VC and 18s are keeping teams to less than 56 points. So if we keep them to less than 56 or so, we're generally going to win the games more so than not. And so far we haven't lost a game this season actually. So we've drew a couple, but we haven't lost any. So that's kind of where we go. In terms of, individual, so they're the team ones we work on. Individually, it's very interesting because each player athlete has a different, need in terms of what they want to achieve. So their goals are very different. Some kids will have the obvious one about wanting to be the highest points, steals, field goals, 3-pointers, free throws percentages. But we look at things like, have you actually taken more free throws? So free throw attempts, we don't really care about whether you make them or lose them because we think you'll actually make them eventually. But have you actually taken enough free throws, which leads to the other team being in foul trouble? Are you getting enough assists? Are you getting enough rebounds? And we actually put these out to each player in terms of categories and league tables every week after every game, so they can see themselves moving up and down the league tables. And it might be that I want to be in the top 3 for free throw attempts. I might want to be in the top 5 for rebounds, offensively, etc. So the kids will have their own objectives, and then we supply them with these statistics every week for them to actually look at and reassess their goals as they go by. A great example was one of our boys was at the start of the season, 5-6 games in, he was, averaging 10 points, and he was like, how can I score more? And we're like, you've got to actually take more free throws, right? How are you going to take more free throws? Well, you've got to actually get inside more and actually force up a lot more fouls from them. And now he's the leading free throw attempt, and he's averaging probably 10, 12, 14 points a game. So they're the little things we try and work on by player as the season goes through.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It's very similar to the methodology Rob Beveridge would adapt into him and his coaching staff would adapt into their NBL games, really focused on the structure of quarter by quarter and then breaking down each quarter and the components of free throws, post touches, turnovers, stops, those type of things, all these key little components that combined make a massive difference over the course of an entire game and then obviously over the course of the season. So it's really interesting to listen to the mindset of a coach who's had the experience that you've had in relation to breaking that down. And I think a lot of our younger coaches who are probably listening to this will get a huge amount out of that. So I appreciate that insight.
And Pete, it's a good point you bring up, actually. One of the things my assistants look at is when we go down the court, we don't look to have one pass shot, which is, again, obvious. But we actually want the ball to go from one side to the other side. We want it to go inside once. We want it to come outside once. And we know by statistics that we score more and our percentages go up when we actually go from one side to the other side, inside the paint, outside the paint. And so they're little KPIs that we try and work on with the kids or the athletes, I should say.
No, that's super. And it's very, very true. Bevo had a philosophy that if the ball went into the post a certain amount of times a game, then his shooting percentage was much, much higher. The field goal percentage was much as higher. And his win-loss ratio was directly impacted by the amount of post touches that were there. So that movement, that ball movement along those side of things, it disrupts the defense, creates more opportunities for the offense, and it gives you easier shots. So, now that's sensational insight, Nick. I appreciate you're a very busy man. We really do appreciate the time and effort you put into your program, and we look forward to what season 21-22 is going to bring for the 18-1s. Good luck for everything, and good luck for the remainder of the current season.
Yeah, hopefully we get 5, 6, 7 more games plus finals when we take out a championship, and then onwards to next year as well.
So we'll hold you to that one, Nick. So look forward to it. Good luck for this Friday night.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having us.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks.